Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stacy Scott, and I'm here with Graham Wickham, President and CEO of Wickham Financial Insurance Services, and we're back with you today with our weekly wrap-up. Graham, what can you tell us about what's been going on in the market this past week?
Yeah, thank you, Stacy. Thank you to all of our listeners being on the call. I had a bit more of a bounce last week in the markets. We saw some favorable economic data, maybe some hope that this last 25 basis point hike by the Federal Open Market Committee might be their last one. So we'll just have to see. But we saw the NASDAQ composite, that tech-laden deposit, up about 2%. We saw the S&P and the Russell 2000 gain about 1%. So in turn, we saw about 7 of the 11 S&P sectors gain. 5% jump in communications, really led by strong revenues and earnings, because we're about in the middle of it, making our way pretty quick to the latter part. We saw some great earnings in Meta and Microsoft and Alphabet. And they kind of continued to fuel or be fueled from advertising, maybe the cloud storage that they saw within their businesses. Crude oil prices jumped a good bit, about 5%, as we saw global demand forecast improve a good bit. One interesting thing I think we saw is the first estimate of Q2 gross domestic product. Now, that's the U.S. economy growth. That was up about 2.4%. So we're looking at some pretty solid growth driven by consumer spending. So certainly not recessionary that we might be seeing overseas, and I'll get into that in a minute. Inflation cooled a good bit in June. We saw core PCE index increase just over 0.2 month over month, but year over year at about 4.1. Now, that's the economic gauge that the Federal Reserve really takes a good close look at in terms do they feel if inflation is in check and cooling. Compensation costs rose less than expected, and I think that's always a good measure for the Fed. So again, I think the concern that the Fed has to raise rates a lot more right now might be cooling even more. Maybe this could be their last hike, but maybe some still cues that they might have another rate hike in September. We did see some strong consumer confidence still out there. It was really at 2-year highs. But we did see some evidence of bottoming in the housing market starting to emerge. Pending home sales increased in June for the first time in really 4 months. And one other stat that we're starting to see now, we're starting to see rents start to lower. So that was a very hot or intense rental market in terms of cost, and we're starting to see it moderate a bit and come down. Internationally, I think we're still looking at PMI staying in expansionary for the United States, but that's not necessarily true. We're still showing signs of weakness over in the UK and in Europe. We look at the European central banks. They did raise rates for the 9th consecutive time. But on the other side of that, we saw Germany inflation really start to fall in July. If we look at Australia, the CPI Consumer Price Index did slow to about 6. Now, it was at about 7 in June. So really starting to see some things come down a bit.
Okay. Well, as we move into the next couple of months that usually tend to be a little bit more challenging for the markets, what do you anticipate seeing happen as summer rolls into fall?
Yeah, well, traditionally, and again, there's no crystal ball here, but a lot of times you see late summer, early part of fall can be a real challenging time in the market. And with the advance that we've had, which has been absolutely impressive, I wouldn't be surprised to get some volatility here, maybe some sideways movement to a little down in some of the areas that advanced the most. But I don't see any reason why maybe we have to have some big correction. The economic numbers are in place. It looks like inflation is still moderating and making its moves down. So as long as we still see that, even though you might have certain sectors pull back that advance so much, you might see some others start to rally around. So we'll see. But I wouldn't be surprised if we get a little moderation this summer.
All right. Well, thank you, Graham. And thank you to our viewers for joining us today. And as many of you know, this week is back to school for a lot of folks.
Yep.
And It's also back to class for those of you who are at or near retirement age. We have our next Retirement Planning Today class starting next week, Tuesday. We have a Tuesday class and a Saturday class, and it's a multi-day class that really gives you everything you need to know about the retirement planning process. So please give us a call if you are interested. We would love to get you signed up. Thanks so much again for joining us today, and we'll see you again next week on the Weekly Wrap Up.
Take care.